Hi everyone, it's Monica and welcome back to Taylor-Made Cards for You. Well, today I have something special to share with you, and this is a journal that I created using the latest kit by Victoria Designs called Lace and Roses Ephemera Holder. Now, the kit is a mega kit, so what that means is you're going to get lots of different principles in this kit to create all sorts of items. And I chose to create this journal because I just loved how dainty it was, and I thought it would be a perfect journal for a little girl thinking ahead to the holidays for Christmas or something like that. So let me go ahead and just kind of share with you what I did here. The journal that I created, typically when I create a journal, I punch the holes and I use the elastic to insert my my pages, but I chose to do something a little different this time, and I actually glued the pages into my journal so that way if you wanted to put some sort of labeling or sentiment on the back, you could do that. So I did do a tutorial, so I'm going to share that with you in just a minute, but I wanted to go ahead and just show you how lovely this journal turned out. I chose to actually just bind it with some lace, and then as you can see, I decorated it with some of the beautiful ephemera that came in the kit, along with a Tim Holtz paper doll. And then I added this little label here, and then it has 3 signatures, as you can see. So when you open it up, I created this little pocket here where I could add some of the ephemera pieces that are just so lovely. And I also added this old vintage catalog card in here as well. So I added a nice little pocket, and then as you can see, I have 3 signatures here using some of this beautiful paper, and then I embellished some of the pages, and I did add some blank pages as well for journaling, because that's really was my intent. Whenever I create journals, I know a lot of people like to over embellish, and that's certainly fine, but I like to create lots of open space for journaling and for the person that actually gets this to kind of make it their own. So I don't like to necessarily over embellish, but I did add a few items in here. As you can see, I added some stickers, some of the ephemera pieces. I added some washi tape as well, and then I did add some of these little beautiful embellishments to add just to the interest of the pages. And then going towards the signature, this is the second signature. I did add a pocket here along with these little inserts. This is an older insert that I printed out from Victoria Designs, and I added it just to the page as an additional element of interest. And then as you can see, again, just more beautiful pages here, and then a back. And then the binding here, as you can see, I ended up adding the signatures to this piece here, and then I attached it to the book. So that's what we're going to create today. I just wanted to do a quick run through of it to show you how pretty it is and how it turned out. And hopefully you can see this. I created some of this, I added some of these embellishments to the end or to the back of the book also, just as added decor. So let's go ahead and share with you what comes in this kit, and then we can jump into creating this really pretty 3 signature journal book. So the kit that I'm going to be working with today is called the Shabby Lace and Roses Ephemera Holder Mega Project Pack, and this is from Victoria Designs. And I have to admit, this is probably one of the prettiest journal sets I've seen by Victoria Designs, and she has some beautiful kits. I mean, this kit is just so gorgeous. It has beautiful colors, it's got some wonderful ephemera pieces, and it's just the type of kit that you want to just dive into and create all sorts of projects. But today what I want to create is a journal book, and I wanted to create it as a gift. So I'm going to not only create a journal book, but I'm going to create some matching cards as well. And that's what's great about the mega packs, is not only do you get items for journals, but you also get just designer paper, you get ephemera pieces, and just all sorts of items to create some beautiful projects. So before I cut everything out, I just wanted to share with you a few of these pieces. Now, there are so many more pieces, but I just printed out a few just to show you how gorgeous this kit is. And as you can see, it's got some beautiful roses and lace theme, hence the name Shabby Lace and Roses Ephemera Holder Mega Pack. There's plenty of room on these pages for journaling, so if you didn't want to over embellish, you can still use some of the pages. But then there's some other pages that are just embellished really pretty that we can include as well. So just a quick look at some of these beautiful pages before we dive into the project. All right, so for the actual journal, it's going to measure, let's see here, it's going to measure length. It's going to be 5 1/4, and then the width of it, the width is 5 1/4, and the length of it is going to be 7 3/4. So it's not going to be a really large journal, but it's perfect as a nice little gift. And then the binding is going to be 1 1/4. So that will enable me to fit probably 3 signatures. So what is nice about this kit is when you choose your paper, I mean, you don't have to necessarily choose the covers that are pre-designed, but if you do, it's already sized for you, and it even has the little notches showing you where to fold it. So I went ahead and I used the pre-designed journal covers, but you can use any of the designer paper for your covers. Okay, so once you have your paper cut out, you're going to go ahead and just glue it down like I did here. So let's go ahead and do this one here. And as you can see, the paper is sized perfectly. So all you need to do is just add some of your adhesive and then give it a minute to dry, and you'll be good to go. Now the adhesive that I'm using is the 3-in-1 Beacon, but you can use any type of adhesive that's going to be strong. I like to use the wet adhesive when I'm working creating journals, because when I want to line it up, it still gives me some movement. And I find if I use some of the adhesive tape, if I don't get it lined up perfectly the first time, I'm pretty much stuck. So as you can see here, I can go ahead and place it down, and I still have some nice movement. So I'm going to give that a minute to dry, and this one is already dry, so we're going to go ahead and work on folding this over. So I'm just using the edges here, and I'll also use my bone folder to make sure I get nice clean, crisp corners. Okay. Right. Now on the edges, if you didn't want to use your wet adhesive, you could use tape here, because as you can see, you've got a nice crisp fold, and that would work fine. But I'm going to go ahead and continue to use my wet adhesive. So you just want to go ahead and just make sure you get enough, so that way when you fold it over, it will be nice and secure. And sometimes when you are using the wet adhesive on the edges, you do have to give it a minute to dry. And then once you get the first side done, you want to do the exact same thing on your other side. And then we'll give this a minute to dry. Okay, so now that I have both pieces covered, before I continue, I do want to go ahead and add just a little bit of my vintage photo, just to add some more grunge to it. Now this isn't required, of course, but I always like to just kind of edge up my journals just to make them look a little bit, you know, old and vintage. It doesn't really take too much, but it's just a nice addition. I want to do the same thing with this one. Okay. Now we're ready to cover the inside. We're going to be using this pattern right here. Now as you can see, I cut it a little bit too sharp, so this corner does show a little bit, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. We'll see what we can do about that once we're finished. A lot of times you can put a pocket or something like that, so that's why I decided to put this on the bottom, so that way if I do decide to create a pocket, we'll have that option. All right. And do this like this. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and just check the size of my paper here, and then we can go ahead and add this. Okay, so before we add the paper, let's go ahead and attach our binding here. And I'm just using regular tape, packing tape, and this seems to work pretty well for me. And ordinarily I'll just double it. So one. We're just going to stick this right in the middle. Just kind of eyeball it. And so I'm just trying to make sure I've got this crease at the bottom nice and tight, and then I'm just going to be bringing it up. I want to make sure I don't have any bubbles, so I'm just trying to work it as I go along, trying to keep it lined up to the top as well. And then we're going to have to trim this a bit, so let's go ahead and trim this down here. Just like that. Okay, now it's a little crooked, but I'm not going to worry about that because my top will cover it. The main thing I'm trying to do is to make sure I get this lined up here. All right, that looks pretty good. And then we'll bring this over. Just pulling tight. And there we go. And then we'll use our bone folder as well as just kind of turning it just to make sure we get some nice creases here to help our journal close. Okay. And then here as well. And now we have the front and the back attached. And now we're ready to add our inside covers here. Just like this. And as you see, those corners covered up nicely. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and add our adhesive. And we'll be ready to go. Just lining it up just to make sure it's straight. Again, the nice thing about wet adhesive is it gives you that movement time. All right. And then the one thing that I did off camera is I added just a little bit more of this vintage photo to take away any of the white edges when we cut the paper. So again, just the details. Okay, so let's get this lined up and we'll be ready to go. So again, I'm just adding some of my wet adhesive. If you prefer to use your double stick tape, it's perfectly fine as well, whatever works for you. Making sure I'm getting this lined up here. Yep. Looks good. All right. Give that a minute to dry. And there's our cover. All right, so as you can see, it's not overly difficult to put together the covers. And you can do any size you want, but with this paper it was pre-cut, so I just went ahead and went with the predetermined size. Now we want to go ahead and work on our pages. Now, for the pages, I like to not only add some of my designer paper, but I also like to add in old vintage copier paper as well. So we're going to be doing that. So let me go ahead and get this cut down, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so I cut out all my paper for my 3 signatures, and as you can see, I used a combination of not only the printables from the set, but also just some really pastel papers that I had in my stash, and I just kind of mixed them throughout. And then on the last page, I did cut or did print on both sides as well, because I wanted to be able to finish with the inside print. So that's how I did all 3 signatures. Now, typically when I do a journal, I will do the elastic and put my signatures inside underneath the elastic. But for this particular journal, I want to go ahead and sew in my signatures. So that's what we're going to do today. So to get my book ready to do that, I went ahead and I cut a piece of chipboard, the same height as my book, but I made it a little bit thinner. So this is 1 inch. And I want to make sure my book closes. That's why it's a little bit thinner. And then I also created this template to be able to punch the holes, because I want to make sure that I get my holes exactly the same on all of my signatures. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to cover this first, and we're going to use the tape that we used for the binding, and this is this tape right here. So nothing fancy about this. We're just going to go ahead and just cover it up. So go ahead and just cut through this. Yes, scissors probably would have been better. Okay. And I'm not going to worry about covering both sides, because one of the sides is not going to show. Okay, so that way when it goes in the book now, it'll match the spine. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and use our awl to punch our holes. So let's go ahead and do that. So I want to make sure my holes are spaced evenly. So this is 7.5. Or actually about 7.5. So what is that? 3.5. A little more than 3.5. Okay, so I'm gonna get my pencil and make my marks. All right, so my first mark is going to be about right there, and I want to make sure that's in the middle, so 1.5, probably right there. And then I'm just going to go ahead and just punch this through. And then here, I want it to be half of this. So a little more than 3.5, so 1.5. So probably around here. Does that look about right? Actually, I think I'm going to make it come a little bit farther. So I'm going to come 1 inch off of the edge. I like that better. Okay, so now that we have all 3 holes in all 3 signatures, we're going to go ahead and start sewing it onto our base here. You have different sizes of needles, so you probably want to test your needle before you start to make sure that it is going to work. You don't want to start sewing and then you're having problems. So I'm going to go ahead and use my white thread here, and this is waxed thread. I find that it does go through the pages easier if it is waxed, but certainly, you know, you can use whatever you feel works best for you. Okay, so as you can see, I have my holes cut in my signatures, and I'm going to go ahead and add them to that piece that we punched the holes in earlier. One thing you want to make sure that when you are putting in these signatures, make sure that your signatures are going the right direction. There's been many times where I've sewn in my signatures and they were upside down, and of course I have to take them out. You also want to keep in mind, if you have any particular order that you want your signatures to be sewn in, to think about that before you actually start sewing in your signatures. Now, another thing that I like to do is, as you can see, I like to use my binding clips to hold my paper in place. And this is so I don't have to worry about it shifting as I'm, turning it and sewing through it. I want to make sure that it's going to hold steady, where the holes will continue to stay lined up. So that way I don't have to fuss with the alignment of the paper. So the first thing that I did, as you saw, is I put the needle through the middle, and I made sure that I had a tail left, because this is where we're going to tie it off. And then I went to the top. You can either go to the top or the bottom. It doesn't really matter. You just want to go to one of the top holes, and then you want to go all the way to the bottom. And then once you go to the bottom, then you're going to come up through the middle again, and that's where you're going to tie it off. So before you actually tie it off, of course, you want to make sure that you pull your strings tight. Make sure that you do have enough string to be able to tie a double knot, so that way you can keep your paper in place. And you're going to do that for all 3 signatures. So just take your time with it. There's no rush. You just want to make sure that your signatures are tight, that the paper is lined up, and your signatures are ready and sturdy, so that way they will have a long life in your journal. And then, like I said, once your string is nice and tight, then you're going to go ahead and tie a double knot. And I like to, like I said, I start in the middle, so that way I'll end in the middle. And I just think that if you're going to have some sort of a tie, some sort of string hanging out, I like to have it in the middle. Now, if you want to be able to have extra string, maybe you want to tie a charm or something like that, you can certainly have your string end at the top. But for the most part, I typically have my string end in the middle, and I tie it off in a double knot in the middle, as I just did here, and then I just trim it. And then you're going to do the same thing on your other 2 signatures. Okay, so now we have all 3 signatures sewn in to the piece that we're going to attach to the book. And at this point, you're almost done. So you're just going to want to find some really sturdy tape, some sturdy glue. When I attach my signatures, I use both. So the tape that I like to use is the red line tape. It's very strong, and it does come in different widths. So I can get the thicker tape here, and I can add it to the back. And like I said, this is really strong tape. I've used this a lot of times for my journals. And then once I get my tape on the back, then I'm also going to come in with some of my glue. And the glue that I like to use is the 3-in-1 Beacon. This is really strong adhesive, but the key is you want to make sure it has a lot of drying time, because remember, this is a book. People are going to be turning the pages, and you want to make sure that this all your signatures don't come up. So you want to give it plenty of drying room. Okay, so before we actually add the wet adhesive, we're going to go ahead and pull the top off of this tape so that way the sticky part is ready to go. So I'm going to just use my pick that I have. You can use anything that's going to be able to pull this up. The red line tape, sometimes the backing can be a little bit hard to pull up, so I like to use some sort of a pointy pick to be able to start it and pull up my tape. And then once you have the backing up, then you can go ahead and add your adhesive. And once again, the adhesive that I'm using is the 3-in-1 Beacon, and I'm going to use a generous amount of this. Now, be careful. Even though you want to use a generous amount, you don't want to use too much so that when you push it down, the glue starts to seep off on the edges. Because that could affect your paper. It could get stuck on your outside of your paper, and you certainly don't want that. So as you can see, I am being generous, but I'm trying to keep the glue towards the middle, so when I push it down, we know that the glue will spread a little bit. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're doing that. And then once you have all of your glue on your binding, then you just want to go ahead and carefully lay it in the middle, lining it up exactly where you want to have it in its final resting place. So just make sure that you are checking the edges, try to get it in the middle the best that you can, and of course it should line up top to bottom pretty easily. And then once you are happy with the placement of your pages, then once again I'm going to come in with my binding clips, and I'm going to bind my book to hold my pages in place. And typically I'll let it sit overnight so that way I know it's nice and dry. And then that's pretty much it. As you can see, this is bound really nicely. My pages are going to be nice and secure, and now it's ready to decorate. So I'm going to go ahead and decorate up the front of this, and then I'll be back at the end of my video to share with you some pictures. And as you can see, what's really nice about this is your strings aren't going to show on your bind, on your, your back border. So you can add a sentiment, you can add some sort of a label. There's lots you can do by not having those sewing strings and those holes. So it's just like a nice bound journal. All right, so as a reminder, this isn't a release from Victoria Designs, and ordinarily she does have some sort of a sale going on the first 3 days of her release. So I'll make sure that I have links below to the shop, Victoria Designs, so that way you can check out the new kit, and hopefully you'll be able to create something beautiful as well. All right, everybody, thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.